morning. We've got quite a day planned. We're webcasting this day-long symposium. So for all of you here and for the countless hordes that are following the proceedings online, I am not the mayor of Toronto. My name is Nick Allard. I'm very proud to be the dean of the best law school in Brooklyn. And, you know, Brooklyn's the biggest and most vibrant borough in the greatest city in the leading state in a magnificent country, so that's not bad. In the existing climate facing law schools, many law schools in the United States and abroad feel pressure to do less and charge more. Now, this law school, in a year of great innovation in educational programming and many other changes, we've looked at the problem very hard, and in fact, we're being a little bit entrepreneurial because we believe there's a niche for doing more and charging less. And so that's what I've been at, and our faculty, led by our board, has been working on. And yesterday we made a major announcement that you may have noticed, that we are going to be reducing our tuition significantly as a matter of access to affordable legal education, to make sure that everybody who is well prepared and talented is not only able to come to law school, but then if they come to law school and they graduate, they're free of crushing debt and able to pursue careers where they are most passionate and best prepared and when there's the most need, and not seek jobs on the basis of solely the job most likely to help them pay off their debt. Now, I mention that because I wanted to, but also because I think it fits very much into the topic of today's program. This has been a remarkable year for this law school. We began the school year with a news conference and panel discussion about our two-year JD program led by the ABA president and several other legal educators in the wake of President Obama calling for a two-year JD. And yesterday, not even at the end, we announced this major groundbreaking approach to the business of law school and the affordability of legal education. And in between, among many other innovations, something else that is very near and dear to my heart happened, which we're extraordinarily proud of, and in the scheme of things is likely, I believe, to have as much of an impact, certainly even outside of the United States, on the course of legal education. And that was the launch of the Center for Urban Business Entrepreneurship, CUBE. And CUBE is envisioned as a top-to-bottom, east-to-west academic program which provides our students with training and experience and substantive legal education that makes them uniquely qualified to become lawyers for new businesses, whether they're small startups, wild high-tech entrepreneurs, creative artists, or new ventures in a large corporation or nonprofit enterprises that have very laudable social objectives. We're also providing them with unique clinical experience because, blessed by being in the epicenter of entrepreneurship in the galaxy, Brooklyn, our students in our two locations in Dumbo, I love saying that, down under Manhattan Bridge overpass, and in Metro Tech, and in the law school, are embedded, working cheek and jowl with the entrepreneurs. Actually, they don't have any jowls. I was thinking of myself when I said that. Especially the Tough Mudder folks that we're working with have, you know, absolutely zero body fat. So that was a bad metaphor. But you get the drift of it. So the two legs of the CUBE stool involve substantive legal education and exquisite clinical training, professional training, real-world experience. But that's not enough. The third leg of the program is embodied in today's symposium, and that is providing a platform that's unique for the scholarly and legal and policy analysis about the laws that affect entrepreneurs. And so this program today, which you are all participating in, and we have a very large number of people throughout the day who will be participating, is really a culmination of something that's personally very near and dear to my heart, but also very important not just for Brooklyn Law School and the Brooklyn community, but I believe as a model for Brooklyn for legal education throughout the United States and abroad. We're really particularly pleased to have so many people on the webcast and participating on our panels and in the audience from overseas. I particularly commend Professor Jonathan Askin, who really first conceived of CUBE. It's so important that Jonathan dressed up today.
I am the referee.
Oh, there you are, right there. Yeah, right. So today he's uncharacteristically formal, but he somehow seamlessly managed to pass from the uptight, button-down, business world that he travels in into the entrepreneurial world. But thank you for especially your really unique outreach abroad, and particularly in Europe. And so with that, I wish you all the best today. Thank you for coming. Thanks for your participation. I'll be popping in and out. I'm going to be chopping prices the rest of the day, so I have hard work ahead of me. And at this point, I'll ask the tremendously experienced and steady Executive Director of CUBE, Paul Gangsey, to come forward. Paul?
Good morning. It's always a pleasure to follow Dean Allard at the podium because I don't have to give my speech. Nick has adequately and eloquently, I think, explained the source of CUBE. I will second the fact that this Center for Urban Business Entrepreneurship is the brainchild of both Jonathan Askin and Dean Nick Allard, and I can assure you that is a very powerful combination. I'm pleased to have the responsibility and the privilege of leading the effort, and I see it as really having two parts to this mission. One is to train our students to participate in the entrepreneurial economy, both as players and as seasoned advisors. And the second is to enhance the law school's role as a resource, and that's really exemplified by the symposium that we have today. So I'm delighted on behalf of CUBE to welcome you here. I wish I could claim to have thought of the Bleak House to Geek House name, but that also goes to my colleague, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the symposium. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Paul.
Well, I think I first have to explain my attire. By the way, I'm Jonathan Askin. I am the director of the Brooklyn Law Incubator and Policy Clinic, and I teach here at Brooklyn Law School. This was a calculated move. Nick, I think, rightly pointed out that I don't necessarily dress like your average lawyer or entrepreneur. But this is my uniform today. I am wearing underneath my Blip Legal Hackathon uniform. And above it, I'm wearing a Brooklyn-made referee's jersey, is the way I'm treating it, because my goal today is to serve as a somewhat bit of a referee, which means I hope it gets a little contentious. I don't know if this is the panel that will get contentious, but I hope things get a little contentious. We have a, by the way, this is since we're semi-tech innovation oriented, please feel free to use your laptops or your phones. Feel free to tweet. If you can't get access to the Wi-Fi information is at the desk. Does anyone not have access to the Wi-Fi who needs it? Good. All right. We've got our Twitter back channel right here, so feel free to use the hashtag BrookLawGeek for comments on the event. I have to thank Jolie and the Internet Society and Legal Hackers for streaming this event. Thanks a lot, Jolie. So this is live streamed now, and we will chop it up for posterity and Each of the panels, demos, workshops will be available for posterity on both the Internet Society site and the Legal Hackers site. Right, Phil? Legal Hackers too? Good. All right. So we have a very broad agenda for today. And when we first thought about this conference, and by the way, you should know, we completely oversubscribed. You could look around the room and think, where are all the people? Maybe it's because it's New York. People don't get up until 10 o'clock. I'm not sure what it is, but we've accommodated 300 people today. And in fact, I didn't tell folks until yesterday that we were streaming this event. So we will get a full house as the day progresses. But we have a very broad set of topics for today and a very broad flow for the day. This is not supposed to be a straight symposium. And when I talked to some of my colleagues several months ago, I think they had some concerns because we didn't have a set agenda, because we didn't have a rigorous structure and papers. But to me, that's not the nature of what being an entrepreneurial lawyer should be about. I talk to my students about us trying to always be able to pivot, like the startups we represent, always being in perpetual beta, like the best of the startups we represent. So I'm hoping that today is very much also in a constant state of flux and perpetual beta. Has anyone ever read the book Where Good Ideas Come From? We got at least one. It's a book written by Brooklyn's own Stephen Johnson, who started a company down the hill called Outside In, sold a few years ago to AOL. AOL didn't know what to do with it and sort of mothballed it. But Stephen has really been a great visionary, and his focus, he's written a lot of great books now, but in Where Good Ideas Come From, he talked about the concept of the adjacent possible. And I think that may mean different things to different people, but I think it's a concept, a phrase that's going to grow in momentum and import as the years progress. So to me, the adjacent possible is the conception that you don't know what the future is going to look like. You don't know what ventures are going to evolve, what great ideas are going to evolve. But they're going to evolve when you get the right people in the room. And that's what I want today to be about, bringing the right people in the room together. That means bringing in lawyers, technologists, innovators, entrepreneurs, other people experimenting with their own professions and interacting with people from other backgrounds. Now, not to too heavily disparage South Dakota, Nebraska, the rest of the country, but there's a reason why great ideas are coming out of Brooklyn. And it's because we've got all the right constituents. We've got the melting pot. We've got people with a wide diversity of backgrounds, all closely in close proximity to one another. Right here in the Brooklyn Tech Triangle, I think we've got something like 1,000 startups. It's probably more startups per square inch than any place else in the known galaxy. So that's why I think great ideas are coming out of Brooklyn. But lawyers have always been late to the table. Lawyers generally are among the most conservative people in society. And law professors, frankly, often more conservative. We looked for some sense of job security. We didn't want to have to run out and get clients all the time. And so we're talking about the most conservative of the conservative. Maybe not politically, but to some extent in the way they go about their lives. I don't think that can play anymore. And we're starting with a panel here. When I look at these four folks, I actually look at the revolutionary forefront of legal academia, and Wilfried also, not an academic, but someone who's been exploring ways of using technology to improve the law and legal process. So between the four of them, my goal, I should tell you about this panel specifically. This panel, we didn't know about this panel until about 2 months ago. Again, this conference has been a sort of a beta test. And about 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, I wrote an article for the National Law Journal in which I largely disparaged America. I talked about how America, for 40 years, really pioneered the concept of experiential legal education, and Europe was a backwater. Europe wasn't training its lawyers to work while in law school to represent the ventures and clients that they might represent when they got out of law school. And that's historically still been the case in America. Law school is the one trade school, professional school, where you can graduate from the school and really not know how to practice your profession. But at least in America, over the past 40 years, we've improved and we've built out our conception of experiential education, and I think we are now producing lawyers who actually can hit the ground running. America also had, I think, more established business laws and business practices. So it became a bit of a bastion for many decades for businesses. So about 4 years ago, I went to the White House, and they were launching something called Startup America, the Startup America Partnership. Does anyone know about the Startup America Partnership? A few of you. Startup America Partnership is supposed to be a network around the country in which experienced entrepreneurs, financiers, others are committed to helping support the startups within their own regions. Silicon Valley and New York and Boston and Colorado, Denver, Boulder and Austin all sort of had a good embedded base of support for their startups. So they were starting to thrive, but there were a lot of other cities and regions around the country that didn't have that. So the vision for Startup America was to build out that expertise around the country so that startups in Nashville could thrive the same way startups in Silicon Valley and New York have. So I pitched the White House at the time. I said, why don't we add a law firm, a law school component to that, a way in which law students could work with the startups within their own region and work with the startups that otherwise didn't have access to affordable legal support. And the White House said, okay, that sounds like a good idea, but I didn't see any movement. Meanwhile, there were wonderful programs, at least one in particular in America, funded by the Kauffman Foundation that Tony Lupino and Esther Barron are connected to. But they weren't connected to the government. They didn't have real bona fide government support. So I took my marbles and I went to Europe. And Europe, under austerity, gave us 500,000 euros to build out this network that I tried to pitch to the White House. So now in Europe, and we've got a representative from our European iLink network of startup law clinics here from the University of London Queen Mary Center for Commercial Law, to talk about what they're doing in Europe. So my thought was, well, now that the European Commission has given funding and acknowledged its need to support the European legal educational community in concert with the European startup community, was going to somehow leapfrog over America. So I think I ruffled a few feathers in America, and Tony, I think, rightly called me on it. And I thought, well, can't we make lemonade out of the lemons here? Can't we try to bring the two networks together, the American legal educational experiential community with the European legal experiential academic community, and see if we can create a network of network, see what we can learn from one another, see if we can create a broad global system where we will share and cooperate. Now, what do law students learn from day one? They learn about competition. They learn you got to beat your classmate, you've got to get the client, you've got to win in court, you've got to get the A, and if you get the A, someone else gets the B. That's really not been the spirit in, I think, clinical legal education. It's really been one based on a collaborative spirit. And it has not been the spirit in the American startup community. Also one based on the collaborative spirit. Has anyone, who among you have never been to a hackathon? So a lot of you haven't been to a hackathon. All right. Hackathons are places where usually technologists and coders go to try to collectively work together for a weekend and resolve issues collaboratively. What's up, guys? And my students and I would go to these hackathons, and we always felt like wallflowers until the very end of the hackathon. We were the lawyers who had to come in and tell the folks who were hacking cool things that they couldn't do it, or if they wanted to do it, here's how you could do it. But we basically wasted 46 of the 48 hours at the hackathon sitting on the sidelines. We decided we were going to embrace the hacker ethos and try to bring lawyers into the center of the hacker community. So we started running legal hackathons. So the goal there was really to instill in law students, and soon to be lawyers, the spirit of the hacker, the collaborative spirit that you can work quickly. It doesn't have to be perfect, but by the end of the weekend, you can produce something that's pretty good. And throughout the day, we'll see a bunch of different results of various hackathons, different projects by lawyers and non-lawyers, technologists, non-technologists, who have gotten together and built platforms that either use the law to improve the plight and progress of ventures and entrepreneurs and society, or have used technology to improve the law and legal process. So that, to me, is sort of how we're going to frame the day. And we'll have a bunch of panels, we'll have a bunch of lightning demos, we'll have a lunch workshop. We're going to treat the lunch like we are, in fact, the digital iteration of the Constitutional Convention. We've got VCXC hosting a lunch for us to build a citizens charter for cyberspace. Essentially, we are trying to write the Declaration of Independence for cyberspace and the constitutional provisions on how humans will exist in a digital world. It's going to be an interesting experiment. We may have too many of us to work collaboratively, but I think that's what they probably felt in 1776 when they wrote the Declaration of Independence and the 1780s when they wrote the Constitution. In any case, I think that's enough for me at the moment. What I'd like to do is, I think I want to start with Wilfried. So Wilfried is not an academic. Wilfried runs something called Innovating Justice. And he was discovered a year and a half ago by our own Professor Garrison at a conference in The Hague, in which she was sort of very impressed by the projects that Wilfried and Innovating Justice had brought to The Hague. And these were all essentially platforms designed to use innovative tools to improve the law and legal process. You may want to restate what it is that Innovating Justice does, but that's the read I get from it. In any case, Wilfried, I was wondering if you could sort of frame what you've been doing the past few years, the evolution you've seen among lawyers and technologists, and the way lawyers may have been embracing innovation, maybe not historically, but are they starting to embrace innovation now? Are we seeing a good, positive, upward trajectory in the role of lawyers in an innovative world?
Thank you, Jonathan, and good morning, everyone. I'm Wilfried de Wever. I'm here from The Hague. So we're looking globally at interesting ventures, interesting innovations in the justice domain. So that is things that improve that dispute management, rulemaking, accountability, drafting of contracts. These are all examples of justice innovations for us. And to me, one of the first, so we have quite a global, very international perspective, let's say. The first thing that strikes us is that still if you Google justice entrepreneurship or justice incubation or justice accelerator programs, you don't find much. You find almost nothing compared to if you Google clean tech or health sector incubation, or then you find millions of programs and millions of support programs. So, and that is still surprising. Does it mean that peaceful, stable, constructive relations between human beings is not so important? Do people not want to pay for that? So what's going on there? So that's one thing that we still notice. There is now gradually and finally new investment vehicles coming up that also support public initiatives or non-profit initiatives, like the social impact bonds that is coming up. So there is new interesting investment mechanisms for things that improve public goods. And that's a new evolution that we very much welcome, because some of the justice innovations are for-profit, silicon-based, IT tech-driven. Some of them are non-profit, more public initiatives. In the research of Hill and also in our own experiences, etc., we've seen and we can make the case that innovations and entrepreneurship is happening. So, because there's still many people who say justice or rule of law or is conservative, there is almost nothing happening. There is no potential in this space. But for example, we have been running a program mapping innovations yearly, and we've built a machine, let's say, that finds 50 innovations per year and publishes them. So we see that there's enough happening, but there's quite some isolated individuals still, or there is no well-functioning specialized ecosystems yet. So some of the examples of innovations that we see are either tools that from within eBay, you have your good is not delivered in an e-commerce website. How do you solve this issue online? And then there's low-cost mechanisms to solve that dispute. Or initiatives in Africa where they start teaching the prisoners to become paralegals. So also very low-tech initiatives that have a lot of promise and a lot of potential internationally. So we find these innovations yearly. We run a prize, we run an award around it, and we connect people around these innovations. And we're building currently the components that will make this into a more effective accelerator. So we're looking at how can we connect more of these innovators to investments and investors, and where are the specialized incubators, where are the specialized investors, where are the ecosystems where there is some traction. In recent years, and we see some of the pieces of the puzzle coming together. So gradually we feel that we're at the point of justice innovation ecosystems to come into existence, like you have in the health and in the tech sector. And I'm also here because the US is one of the places where you have a lot of the elements in place. You have bottom-up entrepreneurship, investors, you have law schools coming in, playing their part, you have entrepreneurs, you have on AngelList about 100 law or justice-related, legal information-related initiatives. So you have the elements in place, and you also have some actors here and top-down government interest to support entrepreneurship, innovation, and the presence of partners like the World Bank, etc., who also want to push this. So, and in London there is also some room. The legal hackathons is something we find very interesting because this is where lawyers come together with IT people and start building things. So we see that, and we also we're looking from The Hague at other locations where this is starting to happen. So you have Nairobi in Kenya, you have Jakarta, Singapore is also really forward-looking with their strategies. So there is things happening, and there's interest both from bottom up as well as from players. I was in Washington recently, and there is, the World Bank. You have several ministries looking at, okay, we have our entrepreneurship support programs, we have our IT support programs, but we don't have yet the connection with justice and rule of law, and now they're finally coming to the conclusion that maybe this could be a good idea, let's say. So that's something we very much support. My role here is to, in any case, I want to make the statement that because the US is quite well placed to make innovations in this space, that and if you're a law student or if you're coming from a legal background, I think then your core competence is also your own profession or your own industry. So do consider disrupting or changing your own industry also, because there is a lot of potential there, and also be aware that some of the things happening here, they have international or global interest, because there is still plenty of room for first movers in this area that can really have a global impact or have an impact in other areas. If you're not doing that, then it will happen from Nairobi or for some other places. So those are the two things I want to say. And
so, Wilfred, that's great. So it may happen in Nairobi. Of the projects that you see coming through the door at Innovating Justice, can you give us sort of a rough sense of where they break down geographically? How many are coming from Africa, U.S.?
We do our best to have a good geographic spread. So, but quite a bit are coming from the U.S. Canada is now also pushing to look more. They want to organize a national prize, etc. So we will have more from Canada also coming in. But we have, I think, the region where we had most difficulties right now to find innovations is more Asia, because they're less easy to track down, let's say. But in Africa, there's quite a bit happening with SMS-based legal information mechanisms, or because African region is an example where if you fix the rule of law issue there, the economic market or the investment opportunities there are so vast that there's a large interest. So for us, Asia was slightly more difficult to find. It doesn't mean it's not happening, but for us also, we don't yet have local innovating justice hubs that help us with local scouting, and that's what we're working on right now.
And of the projects you see, do you have a gauge for what percentage might be coming from specifically lawyers?
We had a track on human rights innovations, and there's quite a lot of lawyers. So if it's really close to rights, let's say, but in some of the other tracks, let's say lawyers, and I'll also try to be a bit provocatively now, but we know that they suck at mathematics and numbers and engineering or product thinking. So very often it's people from those areas who take the initiative when it comes to disruptive innovations. So the lawyers are disappointing us still.
Interesting. Okay, so I want to throw this question out to Esther and Tony, and one of you can then tell us about your experiences. When I first started teaching, I think about 95% of my students, because I teach tech, telecom, internet-related issues, 95% of my students, I think, had science backgrounds, engineering degrees, BS degrees, coming out of engineering work. They made great students, and for me, I was concerned because the law school population was probably 90% humanities and social science undergrads coming to law school. So I wasn't reaching out to that other community besides the hardcore techies. Now I think 7 years later, I think about 80% of my students come from the social sciences and the humanities, because I think now there's a recognition among those students that even if they don't know technology as well as their engineering counterparts, they need to at least understand the language, the terminology, and how to represent those sorts of clients going forward. So they need to know something. So for me, it's been an interesting learning curve to see how they've evolved and grown, the humanities and social science students, to try to embrace that. So maybe that's a good segue into, I don't know if Esther or Tony wants to go next and talk about maybe Esther, you want to start with your program and what you do and what you've seen over the years. How long you've been teaching, and has there been an evolution among the sort of the psyche of your students?
Sure, thank you. And I agree, I feel some pressure to be confrontational or provocative, but I agree with a lot of what you said and what you said as well. And I share your excitement that the entrepreneurial community everywhere in Brooklyn, in Chicago, Kansas City, Europe, exploding. And I'm happy to share that at Northwestern, and I think at a lot of other law schools, the law students are excited about that and taking advantage of tremendous opportunities that this explosion or boom in the entrepreneurial community is presenting to both law students and lawyers. I've been at Northwestern in our Entrepreneurship Law Center for 10 years. I practiced before that. And I have seen a change mostly because of the opportunities that I think are present for our students. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we value experiential learning as a tool to provide our law students with real-world experiences that prepare them to be excellent transactional lawyers when they graduate. And that's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. What can our law students do while they're still in school to get really good, we call it experiential learning, or just real-world experiences to make them good lawyers, whether they're going to represent, like the dean said, big companies, new ventures within big companies, or entrepreneurs, whether they're for-profit or social entrepreneurs. And we've been doing this for a while. So we have a clinic, the Entrepreneurship Law Center, where we represent startups. And within the clinic, our students get a chance to work with entrepreneurs and do all sorts of real-world tasks that lawyers do for their clients, like helping them set up an entity, figuring out what's the right entity, protecting intellectual property, drafting contracts, and now in today's world, one of the most important tasks is a website review, making sure their policies are compliant and don't create additional liability for the companies. Why this explosion in the entrepreneurial community outside of the law school is so terrific for us as educators and for our law students and for lawyers in our community is because there's all these new opportunities. There's all these new companies that need lawyers and need legal representation. Jonathan was talking about at the hackathons how at the end they come in, but those last 2 hours are probably two of the most valuable hours for the participants who are creating new ventures. And we are actively involved in the community in Chicago. We spend a lot of time developing relationships. There's, as we all know, lots of new shared workspaces, incubators, accelerator programs, and they're all creating new businesses. And for law students and lawyers, those are all new clients. So we're trying to figure out, and I think successfully figuring out, how we can be partners with those organizations, because they not only provide us with projects to work on from a legal perspective, like some of the projects I was mentioning, but they also give our students other opportunities to develop skills that you need in the real world as a lawyer, such as networking. We go to events like you were mentioning, the hackathon. There's all sorts of events at these entrepreneurial places where we can meet the entrepreneurs and our students can learn how to build relationships, things you need to be able to do in the real world when you graduate. We conduct workshops on legal issues, and again, are just sort of building our toolkit for our students of the skills that they're going to need to be transactional lawyers when they graduate. One frustration that we probably all feel, all of us in the clinical world, is that we can't reach enough students. So this experiential learning is terrific, but we have 16 students about a semester, and there's a lot more students that need this experience. So we've also spent a lot of time thinking about ways we can reach more students. One way is that we have a simulated course where we try to mimic the experiences the students have within the clinic with a hypothetical client. And we're able to teach triple the number of students in our seminar course, Entrepreneurship Law. And they get to do a lot of the projects that our clinic students do, but they do it for hypothetical clients. So they get very good training, but they're not working with a real client. They're working with a client that we make up and work with for the semester. Still not necessarily reaching enough students. So another tool that we're very excited about that we've been experimenting with, and I think fits in nicely to some of this conversation, where you're saying, you mentioned technology, we need to embrace it. Someone's going to disrupt whatever's happening, and first movers are going to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. And we have seen that in education. One thing that we think is going to be a big part of education going forward is online learning. And we were able to, do you guys know what a MOOC is? How many people here have heard of MOOC? So massive open online course. We did ours through Coursera. There are other platforms. And we had 35,000 students take our entrepreneurship law class in the fall. It was actually, it was not for lawyers, it was for entrepreneurs, but we were able to reach 35,000 students and talk to them and teach them about legal issues for entrepreneurs. So we're excited about the opportunity that technology and online learning is going to provide going forward. Your dean mentioned, and I think you mentioned also, Jonathan, we don't know what the future looks like. And nobody does in any aspect. We don't know what the future of education looks like precisely, but we're betting that part of that future picture involves distance learning, and we're excited that the distance learning breaks down some of the barriers that traditional education has in terms of geographic and, as the dean was mentioning, economic. You can reach more students for free or a much lower price. The last thing I wanted to mention that I think comes up with what both of you said in terms of law students learning how to speak the language of other students. And whatever your background, whether it's engineering or science or humanities, whatever it is, you have to be able to work with people from different disciplines when you're out of school. And you should learn how to do that while you're in school. And it is sometimes a different vocabulary or a different language. And one of the things that I'm really excited about that we've been doing for a while at Northwestern is interdisciplinary education, and I know Tony's going to talk about that more. We have a course where the law students, the engineering students, the medical students, and the business students all come together, work on teams, interdisciplinary teams, and create in different classes. It's a different business, and the one I was involved in, it's a medical innovation, so some sort of medical device. And they spend the whole year creating this device. So they follow doctors around at the beginning of the year. They come up with an idea that the medical students need to vet and confirm. The engineering students build a prototype. The law students work on the intellectual property and the corporate setup. And the business students work on the marketing plan and the business model. But they have to all work together. They have to be collaborative, and they have to learn how to communicate with each other. And that skill in and of itself, whether or not a business comes out of the class, which I'm happy to report, several successful businesses have come out of these courses, which is exciting. But that aside, the success is that they learn how to work with each other and talk to each other and collaborate, which I think is a really important skill for the students from all of the different disciplines. So again, something that I think education going forward will need to have as a fundamental principle.
Thanks, Esther. Now, I think what you've described is, I know you were one of the pioneers in building out this model within your own school. I think we've seen over the course of the past 3 or 4 years an explosion in this model, a move towards more experiential training in the transactional realm. And maybe that's a good handoff to Tony, who's been at the core of building out these networks and interfacing with other schools.
With several other people, including Esther and Tom Morsch at the Northwestern University Law School. No, I think the segue is perfect. I'm Tony Lupino. I am a professor at the law school at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, but also a teaching fellow with the cross-campus Rainier Institute for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, which is very much an interdisciplinary proposition. So I have an outline, I think, that you can, if you want to access it, you can find it online. We can circulate it later. We didn't want to use too much paper. But my themes are interdisciplinary approaches and the importance of networks, which have helped us along and many, many other schools across this country. And we're now delighted that Jonathan's got us in a position where we're reaching across the ocean. He's right. The way this, I use the same exact expression. We're turning this into lemonade. When I called him to say, hey, heads up, your article kind of does a disservice to a network that already exists, and he was very gracious about it, and we shared information, which led him to say, what we need is a network of networks, which is exactly right. And so that'll be largely what I'm going to talk about. I'll give you a brief rundown on what we've been doing at UMKC, but you can read more about that. We're completely open source on syllabi and course materials, everything. So I'd be happy to share with everybody. But I've been involved, and several others at UMKC, with interdisciplinary entrepreneurship initiatives since 2002, really. We started our Entrepreneurial Legal Services Clinic, which serves community entrepreneurs who can't afford legal services, and including students, and I'll come back to the student ventures in a minute. Since then, in 2004, we developed formally an entrepreneurial lawyering program, dubbed that, with two prongs, to better train our students to become effective counselors to entrepreneurs, and to teach them to be entrepreneurial in their practice of law, which increasingly means embracing technology. And we were just at a conference yesterday, and I'll mention another one coming up that hit that point. In general, here's what we have. At UMKC, we have about 8 courses that are specifically directed toward advising entrepreneurs, several of which have interdisciplinary elements. One of them, we're in the 9th year of teaching entrepreneurship and new venture creation, which is law, business, and engineering students with law, business, and engineering faculty in the same room, working in teams on business plans for startup ventures, which then get entered into a competition at the end of the semester. The interesting thing in terms of networking and collaboration is that the projects come some from students from all across the campus, but some from our University Technology Transfer Office, some from University Technology Transfer Offices at another university, the University of Kansas. We have one this year from a hospital research organization. And as everybody said, learning the approaches to problem solving and just the jargon of all these different disciplines is a huge benefit in itself. And so our students have enjoyed that course very much. It's been productive. It has produced some interesting ventures. This year we added to that a social venture creation course, same kind of concept, law faculty and law students working with people from the Midwest Center for Nonprofit Leadership in our business school, which is the Henry W. Block School of Management. Henry, by the way, is the H in H&R Block, the famous Kansas City entrepreneur who started a very modest business that grew into the public company H&R Block, and the story is fascinating. He's in his 90s. He still comes and works with the entrepreneurship students on the campus. So we've had these programs for some time. We have internships where we send law students to technology transfer offices so they can see the process of scientist on a university campus makes an invention disclosure. Somebody has to decide, are we going to try to commercialize that, and so on. So it's kind of, and there's other elements to the program. I don't want to dwell too much on our programs because I'm more interested in talking about the networks that have developed. Many of this has been, the networks that have been created have been facilitated by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City. How many have heard of the Kauffman Foundation? Several people have, okay. Mr. Kauffman was another Kansas City entrepreneur, completely dedicated to entrepreneurship, and his foundation supports entrepreneurship globally. Well, one of the things they did was they helped several of the law school transactional clinics, entrepreneurship, community economic development, intellectual property clinics get started. When we started ours in 2002, I want to say there were about 15 of them. The one that Esther now and directs was started by Tom Morrish at Northwestern. It was one of the first ones. It was pretty apparent that we could do more to get the word around, to connect these clinics, and really Tom and others worked together to develop a network which now has 150 or so of these clinics. There are 200 U.S. law schools, approximately, a little bit more than that. There are 150 clinics. Now, some law schools have more than one. They've been connected. They're about to have their 13th annual conference in Chicago in April, later this month. The Kauffman Foundation started, and we launched, I think, in 2009. Esther's one of the editors. I am the lead editor, and there are 4 or 5 other folks from across the country. They have an entrepreneurship law website. If you Google entrepreneurship law and the Kauffman Foundation, you'll find it. It has a wealth of resources on law school curriculum, business school curriculum, running a transactional clinic, conducting for-profit, non-profit transactions, social enterprise, resource links for entrepreneurs and educators. And there's a list of all these clinics state by state, for example. And there's a listserv that goes with it, which, again, I give credit to Esther's mentor, Tom Morse, who started what was called the Law Biz listserv at Northwestern, allowed the Kauffman Foundation to take it over. It's now called the eShip Law listserv. These clinics have communicated for years now through this with all kinds of constructive questions about, have you encountered this? What do you do about this? And really, many clinics we know from going to other conferences got started by looking at some of the information, the forms, the engagement letters, the procedure manuals for the clinics, which has, I think, largely led to having 150 of them now. So I think I recommend that you look at the Entrepreneurship Law website, and educators can subscribe to it for free, and there are some publicly accessible sections on it too. But other networks that have helped in this cause include USASB, the United States Association for Small Business and Entrepreneurship, which is really a leading organization of entrepreneurship educators across campuses. And they have special interest groups such as technology and entrepreneurship in the arts, social entrepreneurship, international entrepreneurship. And a few years ago, we started one called Law and Entrepreneurship, and it's a special interest group that you can join. USASB is a terrific organization. It's helping us promote, among other things, service from lawyers and law students to entrepreneurs across the country. So just one example of that, which we found to be, we think, an easily replicable procedure that we followed. We work with our business school's cross-campus entrepreneurship program, which has a very aggressive student ventures program. It's called the eScholars program. They took in, I think, 150 applications this year, admitted about 70 to this year-long mentoring. Really, it's in the nature of an accelerator. Usually about half of them pass the test and get launched. Our clinic started representing students in that, and just as Esther said, we can't have too many students in the clinic, so the volume was overrunning us. So we thought, well, when I was in practice I was a business and tax planning lawyer, I wanted to do pro bono work, but the work I'd get would be not things that I was accustomed to. It'd be juvenile criminal appointments, things where I had to go then get help from people who knew it. So we contacted about 30 local lawyers who were business, tax, intellectual property lawyers and said, look, would you be willing to handle one student venture a semester, maybe one a year or one a semester? Asked 30 people, 27 yeses. So now we have a panel of 27 lawyers who are helping students and loving it because it's work right up their alley. It's what they do every day. And so we think that can be leveraged with the clinics across the country. There are other organizations that help the cause. There's the Academy of Legal Studies and Business, which are folks teaching business law in business schools. There's the Global Consortium of Entrepreneurship Centers. All these things are linked in my outline. Same kind of goal of getting this to be an interdisciplinary proposition. It has to be. Entrepreneurship, by definition, is interdisciplinary. The other part of it that we're trying to do that really gets back to Wilfried's comments is many law schools are firmly committed to access to justice, and so one of the things we're finding in the U.S. is there are huge underserved populations of low and moderate income folks who can't afford legal fees, and more law schools are starting incubator programs for their graduates, for new lawyers who are being trained in how to deliver legal services, but with a large focus on serving communities that can't otherwise afford the services. We were at a conference at the Toro College of Law in Islip, not far from here, yesterday, where that was the whole theme. And part of that was embracing technology to make the delivery of legal services much more efficient, which will bring me, I don't want to take up too much time, so I'll bring me to the last point, which Jonathan knows about, and so does Patrick. In collaboration with the Kauffman Foundation, which is providing support to us to do this, we're hosting at the University of Missouri, Kansas City this summer really a law tech conference that has three themes. It's how can technology be used to better match up consumers of legal services with qualified lawyers? How can technology be used to make the operation of a law firm practice more efficient? And how can it be used to actually make the delivery of the legal services more efficient, the document production, the research? And so we found, as is often the case when you're trying to put together a network, that there are pockets of terrific activity all over the place. And you hear about this, and you go to a conference, and there's neat stuff. But until they start to coordinate the way the transactional clinics network coordinated, you don't get the impact. So we're inviting, and the grant allows us to pay for folks to make the trip, reasonable travel expenses, people working in different spaces at intersections of law and technology to have, very much like Jonathan envisions here today, not just a let us tell you what we're doing, but let's work together to try to create a bigger network and to have more impact and to share information and share technology. And the sharing is the key part of it. So most of our success, Esther's, mine, other people in this network have been from, again, just sort of open source sharing. We're delighted that iLink will be represented, and Jonathan will be there, and iLink either in person or electronically in Kansas City in July, because this very much needs to be an international proposition, too.
All right, well, that's a great segue to Patrick, actually. Patrick's been a lawyer in America. He's been a lawyer in England, and he is working with Queen Mary, University of London, on the launch of their entrepreneurial clinical experience, and a member of the iLink network. So, Patrick, maybe you could tell us, and maybe I insulted you. Maybe I said Europe is behind the curve, has been historically behind the curve in experiential education, and is not training the same quality of entrepreneurial lawyers as America.
Yeah, I think I'll come back to that. But firstly, thank you very much for inviting me here to speak, Jonathan, and for Brooklyn Law School for hosting the event. It's absolutely fantastic to be part of this today. Well, Jonathan introduced me. My name is Patrick Cahill. I'm from Queen Mary, University of London, and I run the Q Legal project, which provides legal advice to tech startups and entrepreneurs in East London. I thought I'd just kind of introduce what's happening in the UK firstly, because I'm sure you're all very aware of what's happening in the US, but Europe is moving towards a similar model of providing advice to tech startups and entrepreneurs in Europe. So I'll just briefly introduce entrepreneurship clinics in the UK. There aren't very many of them, is really the overview. But there is a development towards more clinics opening at universities, which will provide support to tech startups. Then I'll just talk about Queen Mary's response to London as a tech city. And I'll move on to explain a bit more about the iLink network, which has already been mentioned. So I'll just introduce some of the clinics that are currently operating in the UK at universities. And a lot of these clinics, I have to say, and reflecting Esther's point, do not have kind of assessment methods in place. They're usually extracurricular, which is different to the US model. So we work quite a lot in the UK with external counsel in the provision of legal advice, which I think is quite different to the approaches here in the US, and I think that's something that we'll be able to talk a bit more about later on. I'll just kind of run through these really quickly. There aren't very many of them. The first is University of South Wales, which provides small businesses and social enterprises with legal advice. The second is Northumbria, which is based in Newcastle in the northeast of England. This university operates almost like a law firm. It employs attorneys, solicitors who provide advice through student advisors. And they don't necessarily target startups and entrepreneurs because there aren't really that many startups and entrepreneurs in Newcastle, where the university is based. So at the moment, what we're looking to do with Northumbria is to look at how the boom of Tech City in London can assist them in their client uptick. Coming to London, there's basically only two universities which are providing advice to tech startups. One is City University, and this model of advice delivery is by attorneys delivering the advice with students kind of note-taking and supervising their work. It's a drop-in model, so people can just kind of turn up to the meetup and get face-to-face advice. A project we run at Queen Mary University, Law for the Arts, provides business advice, and the university itself has a legal advice centre which has been established in 2006, which usually provides advice to individuals in family, criminal, housing, landlord and tenant matters. So it's had a real kind of justice focus. And the Q Legal project, which has recently just been launched in January, is a move away, I guess, to supplement the services that are already provided at the university. So Q Legal essentially is in response to London becoming a tech city. So in the past decade, there's been so much inward investment and government support to encourage businesses into the east of London, to encourage them to set up offices, a lot of co-working spaces. There's a lot of incubators. Google have recently opened up Google Campus, which provides free space for tech startups and entrepreneurs to work. There's a lot of support from government agencies. There's a lot of funding available for technology startups. So in response to this movement in London, the university decided that we should provide some sort of legal provision in order to respond to the boom in East London, in Tech City. So I'll just talk a bit about Q Legal. It's provided by postgraduate students at the Centre for Commercial Law Studies. So students work on cases in pairs, and they work in a number of ways. They advise clients directly, so they interview clients and will provide written advice 21 days after the interview. And they work with external lawyers. So we work with in-house counsel from Intel, from Unisys, from Google, but we also work with kind of large international law firms and also high street practices, which I think is a bit different to the way most US law schools operate their legal clinics. And I'd be interested to talk a bit more about that. We also go into the community, so we work with a number of organizations, both government and private. So we work with School for Startups, which is an organization which provides finance to people with ideas that want to take those ideas further. So our students actually go in to those organizations and provide legal advice in a workshop format. Some of our students also draft toolkits for our website. So this allows them to go away and research a particular legal issue, such as kind of business structure, confidentiality, licensing. And these are uploaded to our website. So when clients contact us to get free legal advice, we will often kind of tell them to go to our website to check out the toolkits before we actually would provide that face-to-face advice. Because we work with a number of professionals, they also provide talks on different areas of law, and these are also hosted by the university. So it's been mentioned already, but Q Legal is part of iLink, and the idea behind iLink is to create a network within Europe to support and encourage innovation and to encourage entrepreneurship in Europe. And one way that iLink can do this is through the provision of free legal advice. So what we're doing with iLink is supporting and developing best practice at different universities within Europe. So we have a number of universities involved in the network so far. The founding members of the iLink network are Queen Mary University, Amsterdam, Leuven and Hamburg, and we're very thankful to work with Jonathan at Brooklyn in developing this European network. At the moment, what we're particularly looking at is how students are assessed within clinic at universities. I know that the United States is way ahead in terms of its assessment methods, and in Europe we're still looking at different models of how students are assessed. We're also looking at the different models of how students participate within legal clinic, and also how startups access legal advice. There's not really one fit of how students or how startups access legal advice, but we're going to look at different models of how they do and come to a conclusion on what works and what doesn't work. So we'll be happy to share that with anyone who's interested. And with that, we're looking at the legal challenges which startups face. One example in Europe is immigration law. We're finding that actually in Europe, startups are finding it very difficult to get employees into London, to get employees into the UK. So we'll be looking at the legal challenges in Europe and how those can be overcome. And we'll be writing a policy paper which we will present to government after that. So that's kind of an introduction to what we're doing in Europe. I'd be really great to kind of hear more about what you're doing in the US in terms of assessment particularly, and also what the legal challenges of startups here in the US are and how you're meeting that demand within kind of a university setting.
Thanks, Patrick. So frankly, it's my hope that this becomes just the tipping point for a much bigger conversation between all of us in America and all of us in Europe to build something so we can learn from each other. Now, my first question, and maybe have to be my last question, we're running short on time, is we all have, it seems, a unified mission in training the next generation of lawyers to think more like entrepreneurs, to better represent entrepreneurs, to be more innovative in their practices. How do we assess that? Have we made any progress? If we haven't made as much progress as we'd like to, what are the steps we should be taking to make sure that this next generation of lawyers better represent entrepreneurs and think more entrepreneurially and innovatively?
Well, assessing how many ventures are being created, whether people like their lawyers.
Well, maybe whether or not people are scared of their lawyers anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it used to be we were the necessary evil. We were the roadblock.
I'll tell you, it's exactly right. I mean, when I got started in some of the interdisciplinary stuff through a Kauffman Foundation program where they took 11 faculty from different disciplines, from 4 universities, to design interdisciplinary courses. I went to the very first meeting, and several of the people, it was pretty clear they were saying, who invited the lawyer to the entrepreneurship party? You know? And I tell my students that all the time, so they have to add value. I think a lot of us across the country are making impact in explaining to the students that you have to show that you're bringing something to the table here, that you're saying can do and not can't do all the time. Now, obviously, you have to tell people where the lines are and you have to comply with the law, but you have to have solutions and other ways to get to their objectives. So I think we're having an impact. How to measure it, I'm not sure. We can measure how many clinics there are. That's gone up 10 times in the last 10 years or so. But in terms of how many, whether the culture is shifting, we think so, but I can't say that I have an accurate measurement of it.
I can just give one anecdotal piece of evidence that I have from our experiences in Chicago that the entrepreneurial community, at least, is much more embracing of lawyers. A few years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when I would go to organizations and say, don't forget to involve the law students. We want to be part of your programming. Let us be on your panels. Let us come to your events. They'd say, okay, fine. We'll save you a few spots, and they'd let us come. And we would have the same conversation with our students. Remember, you have to add value. Talk to them about their business ideas. Give them suggestions that are helpful. And over time, I think that's really done a 180. And I think now, oftentimes, the law schools are the first, maybe not the first, maybe that's too lofty, but we're included. And when people have conferences, hackathons, or events, the law students and the law schools are right on the invitation list, and they're excited to have us. And our law students report back to us that when they go to these networking events or other activities that are happening, they're not standing against the wall trying to get into a conversation. When they say, oh, I'm a law student or I'm a recent alum from a law school, people say, oh my God, I'm so glad I met you. Let me talk to you. And then, by the way, would you mind talking to 7 other people that I'm friends with that are dying to talk to a law student or a lawyer about some issues that we're having? So we're just seeing more and more that we're included in the conversations and we're valued in these conversations. And entrepreneurs, want to have us at their events. They want to have us on their teams. We're seeing more and more business startups where there's a spot held for someone that has either their JD MBA, went to law school, is in law school. So we're feeling more included in those conversations in those events.
And I just wanted to underline, as I said earlier, I think it's important to get the law students involved on the front end. If they're actually seeing the business plan develop from ideation to developing the product to pricing to marketing, instead of coming in kind of later and saying, oh, you have some legal issues.
Exactly.
If you see the context, it's so much more helpful.
Yeah. And I mean, at Queen Mary as well, our students are involved in not just legal drafting and research, but also they get trained in marketing as well. So they're out at those events, and they really enjoy networking with kind of young, energetic, really enthusiastic innovators and inventors and people with ideas. And the feedback that we get from students at Queen Mary is that they love talking to them and finding out what their legal issues are, even though they might not necessarily understand them and know how to respond. They can do that later, but they're opening up that opening up basically the avenue for communication, and they really understand, I think, that we are providing a service and it needs to be a good service. So I think when they actually acquire those clients, that they understand that more, and it becomes almost personal to them.
Can we get a reality check from the this is actually, maybe you're the right one to do this. A reality check from the audience and then a verification from Wilfried maybe, or we can go wherever you want. But those of you who are not lawyers in the audience, do you look at the lawyer today as the necessary evil, the last resort, or is it someone you try to incorporate into your business processes? All right, so it's still incumbent upon us to prove to the world that lawyers play a vital role. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, Wilfried. Share your insights.
Yeah, I'm still a bit concerned that there is a lot of progress being made on lawyers giving legal advice to entrepreneurs. So I see that happening. But if you look at some of the institutions of law and justice, whether it's the courts or the Congress or Parliament, they are still very much the same as 200 years ago. And this is starting to be a problem. So there is people around the world starting to question, does democracy still work? Because we have mobile phones, we have everything, but we can't connect mobily to the Congress or whatever. And this is starting to be a risk for society in some places around the world. So I don't see the lawyers yet stepping up and changing their own profession or their own institutions. And that's a difference between giving advice to entrepreneurs or taking the entrepreneurial role in your own domain.
So I see 2 scary characters in the middle and the back. In fact, they are not lawyers, but they are very disruptive. And they're going to speak a little bit later. And this I think, gets to Wilfried's point. We've got 2 technologists in the back of the room who started something called Docracy. They'll speak a little bit about what they built with Docracy. But to me, when I first spoke to them maybe 4 years ago now, I was scared to death by what they were doing. They're building a platform that essentially disintermediates lawyers. So the crowd can build contracts. And I thought, doesn't this destroy the profession? Are we now going to be disrupted the same way music was disrupted and video was disrupted and brokerage offices were disrupted, travel agents? Are these guys doing to us what their predecessors had done to the other service sectors? But I thought it was best for us to embrace them because this is inevitable. We'll hear from them a little bit later, but I think the issue that we've got to deal with is, are we dinosaurs? Is it like the Matrix? We're dead already, we just don't know it. Are we the dinosaurs, or how do we evolve to play this role? Every single business is built on perpetual beta, ability to pivot, moving quickly at the speed of light, not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. Lawyers are almost the opposite. We are ethically bound, professionally bound to be thoughtful, methodical, careful. And that means we can't can we work as quickly as our clients? And how do we train the next generation to work that quickly so that we're a value add? I used to represent a company called Free World Dial-Up. No one's ever heard of Free World Dial-Up except my students. Free World Dial-Up was Skype before Skype was Skype. But they had a lawyer who put the reins on them, me. And in the process of the year it took for me to get federal clearances to let Free World Dial-Up do what it wanted to do, Skype did what Free World Dial-Up wanted to do. So for me, it's a lesson learned that I can't necessarily always be the yeah but lawyer. There has to be a role for the lawyer to pave the way so their client can get there fast and first.
I think a lot of us think technology is going to be part of the answer to that. I mean, a lot of things I used to do with questions and answers with clients where I was on the clock hourly can be done much more efficiently with technology if we really develop it in a sophisticated way. So, and it's one of the reasons we're having the conference in Kansas City is to figure. I was kind of a tech dinosaur. I confessed yesterday at a conference that when they first gave me a computer in the law firm I was at 15 years ago, I used the monitor for Post-it notes. And then I learned how to use it. Then a client took me aside and said, Tony, here's the deal. Technology happens with you or to you. So you got to get with it. And the profession has to understand that. And that'll, I think, make us more effective.
Both Tony and Esther said two dirty words. Well, Tony said a dirty phrase. Esther said a four-letter word. Tony said open source, which has historically been a scary concept to lawyers, proprietary issues, and that's changed. But Esther, I think, said the dirtiest word of all, at least to legal academics. She said MOOCs.
MOOCs.
She said MOOCs. MOOCs are about the most disruptive thing we could see in education, and now it's starting to penetrate into law schools. But I think there is something to it, and I think to the extent that many of us are involved in experiential education, we see the value, I think, of recognizing that there are certain things that can be done online quickly. A lot of doctrinal classes can be done effectively, but it's that hands-on training that needs to be done in the law school with trained supervisors. Is that what you imagine? Is that in your move to MOOCs, are you imagining more of the straight substantive doctrinal courses being done online and now more of the hands-on practical work being done within the class?
I'm going to give you an answer without an answer because I think it goes back to we really don't know what the future looks like, but we have to experiment, figure it out, embrace it, and like Tony said, don't let be part of technology, don't let it happen to you. You said it more eloquently, but we have to figure out how to use MOOCs, and I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but it is going to be part of all education, including legal education, and I think there's a way to use online education or distance learning to be really effective and make our system a lot more helpful, efficient, and accessible. And it's incumbent upon all of us as educators, lawyers, leaders in different areas to figure out how to do that and make sure we do it well.
All right, so I look at the four panelists up here as sort of one spoke in the hub of this community that we've got going today and that will build into perpetuity. So I think we've got to call it quits on this panel, but I want you to know most of these folks will be hanging around and we're going to need their insights as academics and as people who are watching legal innovation. We're moving on to some lightning rounds. Now, frankly, I got to thank both David Giller and Michael C., who are our innovation prospectors. They've been tasked for the past couple months with scouring the web and speaking with as many people as possible to find some innovative, legally disruptive projects, people doing things with law and people doing things with technology to build new platforms. Some are lawyers, some are technologists, some are lawyers and technologists. Part of our objective today is to see what other people are experimenting with out there, to see how it can inform our discussion, and to see what we can learn from them and what we can build on from their pioneering work. So some of these are sort of the best of legal hacks. Some of these are things that they, I think, found through the Innovating Justice website. So we've got, I think, a good cross-section of lawyers, technologists, Americans, Europeans, sharing with us their ideas on how they use the law to transform the nature of entrepreneurship and ways in which they can use technology to transform law and legal process. So I think that's a segue into, are we going through our lightning rounds now, David? All right, we've got three lightning talks from folks that at least I've seen demo under different circumstances. I think they all come with their own unique perspective, all offering something that arguably transforms the way we as lawyers will function going forward. Do you want me to just, is Vinay here? Here he is. All right, so Vinay is a lawyer and a quasi-technologist, law firm, been general counsel to a couple different startup ventures, is now working with a company called Shake Law. Has anyone heard of Shake Law? Wow, a lot of you have heard of Shake Law. All right, good. His talk is on Tiny Law, putting the power of everyday contracts in consumer hands. You want to take the podium and tell us what you're up to? So these are basically going to be very quick talks, targeted talks on what they see and what they're doing to revolutionize the law.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Jonathan, and it's great to see everyone here. My name is Vinay Jain. I'm the Chief Legal Officer at Shake. We are a technology that allows people to create basic legal contracts in a matter of minutes. I want to start with a bit of good news. The good news is that the legal services marketplace is larger than we think it is. And the reason it's larger than we think it is because when we size the market, we only look at the work that attorneys are already doing. But in reality, there are billions of transactions that are taking place every day. I'm just trying to point the clicker in the right direction. Where does it go? Oh, it's right under here. Okay. I work in technology, ladies and gentlemen. So there are billions of agreements that happen every year that lawyers never touch and never see because it's not cost effective to get an attorney involved. We're talking about freelancers, consumers, small businesses, getting business done every day on their own through vendor agreements, various small contracts, bills of sale, promissory notes, etc., etc. It's the opposite of big billion-dollar transactions and bet the company litigation. It's the opposite of big law. It is tiny law. Hashtag tiny law because it's not official unless it becomes a meme, so please tweet away. So tiny law is the name that we've given to the long tail of the legal marketplace. And we think that of all the sectors that are going to be innovated through the use of technology in the legal industry, this is one of the most interesting because it's one of the fastest growing. It's growing fast for a variety of different reasons. One is the amazing rise of the freelance economy. There are currently 42 million independent workers in the United States. That number is going to rise to 60 million in the next 6 years. That's going to be 40% of the U.S. workforce. These are people whose livelihood is governed by short-term, frequent contracts. Mobile workforces. People with smartphones now have an entire office in their pocket, and they expect their business tools and their legal tools to be portable as well. And finally, the sharing economy. We are renting our apartments out on Airbnb. We are renting our time out on tools like TaskRabbit. Again, increasingly, people's income is coming from short-term agreements. And so they need tools that will help them with those agreements. Whether they write down those agreements or not, their livelihood is being governed by these agreements. Of course, they don't often write them down because currently the way that the legal services industry is structured, it's not cost effective. Contracts are complicated. They're not accessible to non-lawyers. Legal services are expensive. We do not have the ability, even though these individual transactions in the aggregate are worth a lot of money, because they're not worth very much money to attorneys professionally. At an individual level, the marketplace overlooks them. We are essentially, as lawyers, expensive custom tailors in a marketplace that is crying out for affordable yet stylish off-the-rack clothing. And that is where Shake comes in. Here's the app. You simply select from a series of different agreement types. There are consulting agreements, independent contractor freelance agreements, confidentiality agreements, bills of sale, promissory notes, a few other agreement types. You answer a few questions. The information that you enter gets populated into a template, and you can sign, send, and manage those agreements from the app. The agreements are clear. Anybody can use Shake. The language is legally effective and powerful, but it's understandable by non-attorneys because practically there's not much value in a contract that the parties who sign it don't understand very well. It's also calibrated. There's no need for a 4-paragraph indemnification provision for a $500 transaction, and we recognize that. The agreements of the future and technology that we hope to build are going to be smart. We've just scratched the surface of what we can do. Think about all of the technology that's built into your smartphone, the camera, the microphone, GPS. If the purpose of a contract is to capture a meeting of the minds, why not incorporate video? Why not incorporate multimedia? Why not use the fingerprint sensor to authenticate IDs? We don't have to settle for just being on par with paper contracts. We can actually surpass them. Similarly, agreements can be interactive. What do you do right now with a contract? You write it down on a dead tree, you file it away in a drawer, and you never look at it again unless there's a problem. It's such a shame because contracts contain so much valuable, actionable information. They are the blueprint for a relationship between two parties for days or weeks or even years into the future. By structuring that data, parsing it, digitizing it, we can glean actionable insights from it. We can send you helpful, timely reminders. We can send you things that will help you actually carry out the terms of your agreement, like automatically sending out invoices or sending out payments. Similarly, we can help contracts become informative. If you've ever practiced transactional law, you know that the most common question you get from your clients is some variation of, am I getting screwed? What are the market terms for this transaction? Well, by aggregating data across thousands of similar transactions, we can start providing some of that information for you. So, in conclusion, the future is exciting, and I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say this, but I think lawyers should be the ones inventing that future, not the ones trying to catch up to it. So, thank you.
Thanks, Vinay. Is Amanda Brock in the audience? Where I don't see Amanda. Where? Yeah, you are. Come on up, Amanda. Now, we're going to jump across the pond again. And Amanda is a tech lawyer, an open source expert. She's going to tell us, she works with a lot of the incubators in London, and she's going to tell us, what's the title? Eating Your Own Lunch? What are we calling it? Eating Your Own Dog Food, yes.
So when Jonathan asked me to come and speak to you, he asked me to share some of my experiences and thoughts as a UK lawyer, European lawyer, I guess, a lawyer who spent 15 years in-house working in companies. And like a lot of young lawyers, when I first went into a company, I was very arrogant. I thought that knowing about the law was all that mattered. And I guess I was a blocker to a number of deals because they weren't quite technically the way I wanted them to be. And I very quickly learned that's not particularly career enhancing if you want to be a successful in-house lawyer. And the way to do it is actually to eat your own dog food. So I now work as a director in a law firm, and we have a dog. We have a beautiful black Labrador in the office called Scout. And when I told the office that's what I was going to talk about, they kind of looked at me and said, you know, kibble, it's not that nice. But actually, while the dog likes to eat kibble and I don't, to have a reasonably successful career as a lawyer and actually feel that you are working with a company in a way that's going to add some value, you really do have to learn to eat your own dog food. And what I mean by that is that you have to learn to integrate into the business. So I've worked in companies where I've been suited and booted because that's what the client does. That's how those companies work. I worked for 5 years for Mark Shuttleworth in Canonical distributing Ubuntu. I wore jeans to work. After my first day, I learned to use IRC and to answer legal questions and find a way of tracking my answers in IRC. I learned how to use Google Docs to do contracts and red lines because that's what the business wanted. I think tools like Shake are absolutely fantastic, but actually you have to go into an organization, whether you're in private practice or whether you're in-house, and you have to understand how they work. You have to bend to what they want to do. That doesn't mean you're not going to give them good legal advice, it's a total given, but you have to think about the kind of way they work. So I haven't had a paper contract that I've kept other than a deed that needed to be kept or an assignment for 6 years. I've worked in a paperless environment because that's what the client wants. They wouldn't give me a filing cabinet, for God's sake. You know, what was I going to do? I had to learn to work with PDFs, digital signatures and scans. So my advice to anybody giving advice to a client, whether that client is your in-house client or your law firm client, is find out how they work, find out what they do, understand their product. If you can use their product, all the better. If you can't use their product, learn to use what they've got. In Canonical, we use Salesforce as our sales tool. So I learned how to adapt Salesforce to make it into a contract management and a document creation system. But I didn't try and reinvent the wheel myself. I went out to other software companies that were using it, asked them what they'd done, found a little shop in California that had modified the software to work for them, and worked with that. So it's a very short talk. It's got 3 key messages for you. Learn to understand your client, work with the client tools, use what they've got, and learn to understand what it is they need and build that in. Now, I guess I've probably got a minute and a half left, Jonathan. I don't know if anybody wants to ask me anything about working in-house, about working with tech companies, but I'm happy to talk about that with you now if you have any questions, and I'm happy to talk to people later.
And is Vinay still in the audience? You're still there. Okay. I was thinking we'd hold questions for after the 3 lightning talks. So hang around. Is there a question specifically for Amanda? Yeah. All right. I'm going to invite Elise.
You said something earlier I'm going to actually argue with you about. You said European lawyers are not entrepreneurial. I don't think that's true. I work in a boutique law firm with 14 people. I think we have 6 lawyers, 2 patent attorneys, and then half a dozen computer scientists. And we've worked with companies like King.com. I'm at level 250 in Candy Crush because I work with King.com. We worked with people like DeepMind, and we really had to understand what their technology was and what it did, or we couldn't understand the risk that we were building into the contracts, and we would fail. And we'd fail ourselves because the contracts would be bad, but we'd also fail the clients because they would have a terrible IP strategy that wouldn't match the product.
Good. Are there is there a Shake Docs in London or an equally disruptive legal platform?
There are quite a few tools that commoditize legal services, sort of docs-based tools, and it's very easy to, I'm sorry Vinay, but it's quite easy to build your own version of that into your system and commoditize your sales team's work and put balance and checks in there that stop them giving discounts of more than 3% in your own document creation systems. But there are off-the-shelf products, mainly made by ex-lawyers actually, which is a good thing in as much as you know the risk is taken care of. Bad thing maybe in that they're not as forward-thinking as they could be. We're always encumbered by being lawyers.
Vinay, Shake Law, does it abide by European nation-specific laws? Do you have a product for the European community?
We have not designed a product for Europe. We've focused on the United States.
Okay.
John, it is a real problem. It's something that in the open source work I've done we've really come across, because a lot of the licenses try to be multi-jurisdictional, but they work from the basis of US laws. And then you get into something like French law having particular rights that just doesn't work with. You can't assign copyright in a certain way. So there are a number of European projects, particularly around open source, where we're trying to manage those documents from a European perspective and create open tools that people can then go to. So one project I'm working on now is building an app chooser that will have a background of all the different licensing requirements that you can dig through in the app.
So part of my hope with building bridges between the American legal academic community and the European legal academic community is that we can actually harness law students to to do some of the necessary research to make sure that we can come up with unified processes and platforms that will work across the Atlantic, at least, if not across the globe. So perhaps this is something we'll be talking about down the line. I want to invite Elisa up to the podium. Now, Elisa, I had met her a couple times, but we just chatted a few days ago. We were part of a transatlantic, actually a transglobal almost, legal hackathon in February. There was an outpost in Brooklyn, an outpost in London, and an outpost in San Francisco. And one of the winning projects, at least at the New York iteration of the legal hackathon, was a product called Ghost Drop. I wanted them to call it Snap Judgments, but Ghost Drop was essentially Snapchat for legal documents. So these are, they wouldn't be subject to discovery. You'd see the document and it would disappear.
I get a volunteer from the front row to video me? Thank you.
Okay. While she gets her volunteer, I was speaking to Elisa the other day, and she indicated that she's building essentially a more secure Snapchat.
And
so she's going to demo
exactly
for it.
What we've done. I'm wondering if there's a way to show my phone on there, or if the slides will just have to do. All
Lloyd,
right,
can we get her
slides will
phone on
just
there?
have to do.
I doubt it. No.
That's all right. So let's just queue up my presentation.
Yeah, we have presentation here.
I uploaded it to your file.
I didn't see it.
All right, well, I'll start the demo. So my name is Alyssa, and I'm the founder of Glimpse, and we have a more secure Snapchat for you. So Glimpse is end-to-end encrypted, I saw that you have Christopher from the ACLU here later today. The ACLU is representing Snowden. Snowden said we need easier to use end-to-end encryption for mainstream regular users, and that's what we've built. Our app looks a lot like Snapchat or Instagram, and we've done that to make it as easy to use as possible. I'm going to take a photo of the audience. Let's see if my phone is very small, but maybe you can see what I'm doing. So we have these two filters. And what happens is if you take a screenshot, it ends up scrambled. And you'll see that if you're able to see my presentation. And so that's ultimately what makes us really different, is we're screenshot proof.
Can you show it on the Internet Society's camera? Put it in.
Yeah, we're trying to stay in front of the camera.
Right here? I'll let you do it.
No, just hold it.
Okay. So that's what makes us really different. It's not only that we're encrypted on the camera. We need Glimpse demo. Yeah, please sit down. We need Glimpse demo. Yeah, where's the mic? Can you guys hear me? I'll turn it on. You can hear me now? So that's what makes us really different. It's not only that we're encrypted and we're ephemeral, but if you want to send a message and make sure no one else ever sees it, you use the Glimpse filter, and the person you're sending it to can't take a screenshot. So the threat model is that the recipient won't be your friend later. Okay, great. So I'll run you through this really quickly. Glimpse is ephemeral, it's encrypted. We're marketing ourselves as a sexting app because we want to be mainstream, but then I'm speaking to people like you about our real goal, which is digital rights. And as you can see, if you use our filter overlay, the messages come out scrambled. That's basically it. I promised that I would keep this to about 3 minutes, so I don't want to stay on the stage too long.
So there was a lot of backlash with Snapchat because people were using it convinced that their communication was going to be secure, and then many people found different ways, including screenshots, to actually preserve the information, the photo.
That's exactly right, and that was our inspiration. I loved using Snapchat, but I can't send something that's really private if I don't trust the company holding the data, and if the person on the other end can just take a screenshot. So with Glimpse, it's encrypted, so you're not worried about hackers. With the filter, you're not worried about screenshots, and we delete all the data from our servers. We're really taking care to make sure that we're closing every possible loophole, so your message is really like whispering in your friend's ear.
But do you think that Glimpse actually solves the final problem? Or now do we have a next generation of folks who think, well, Snapchat wasn't secure, but you know what? Glimpse really is secure. I'm going to show the most outrageous stuff by using Glimpse, and then they get in trouble because it's now exposed.
What I like about how we're running the company is our transparency. So if you read our privacy policy, and as lawyers, this might be interesting to you. I had a lot of fun writing it. We're really straightforward about what we do and don't accomplish. So the problem with Snapchat is the discrepancy between what they actually are good at doing and what they're marketing themselves as doing. We're trying to be as transparent as possible about the ways that people can get around our technology. So someone could rig a video camera, for example, and take a video of the message, and we're pretty clear with our users that that can happen. That's pretty elaborate. We're really solving the casual screenshot problem. And we're also open to fixing the app. If you discover holes in our app, we want to fix it.
So a couple questions to you. Are you a first-time entrepreneur?
No, I'm 35. I wish.
Okay, so you've had ventures before this.
I have.
With this venture in particular, do you have an exit strategy? Would Snapchat be a good acquirer of your technology?
Snapchat would be the worst acquirer for many, many reasons. And our goal is to remain independent. And we believe that we can do that for a long time. One of my investors, Gene Hoffman, was CEO of a public company, and he's been grooming me to ring the bell on the NASDAQ, so that's definitely our ideal situation. Our worst case would be, if it looked like staying independent wasn't an option, I would want to come on as like chief privacy officer of an acquiring company. We don't want to get eaten up by Facebook or by Google and then become Facebook or Google.
So I think this is a terrific product. My concern is it easily replicatable? Do you have any patents on anything?
We have a provisional patent on the filter technology. And that was really fun. It turns out that there are a lot of filter tech out there that's been patented that makes your photos look better. We have the only filter that makes your photos much worse.
So are you scared that Snapchat could just take your idea now and run with it and make theirs a more secure
I don't think
Snapchat?
so. They're not very technically competent. The founders are brilliant. I give Snapchat a great deal of credit, but I don't think that they can implement tech as fast as we can. Our tech team is just so much better, and we're a lot more passionate. They're young. When I talk to VCs and branding partners who've spoken to the founders, they've expressed a lack of interest in working with them. So we have a real advantage because the people who talk to us see that we're very mature in terms of how we do our business relationships.
Okay. So only an iPhone app at this point?
Only what?
Only iPhone at this point?
We're only iPhone. We're about to start fundraising, and we'll use that money to build for Android. If you know great Android devs, we're hiring.
All right, thanks, Elisa.
Yeah, thank you for squeezing me in.
Sure. We may have time for one question for either Elisa, Amanda, or Vinay, if someone's got it. How are we on time? Do we have... We're okay? All right. Question? Yeah.
Anybody see a role for the Bitcoin protocol in the entrepreneurial activity?
So if the folks get the question. A role for the Bitcoin protocol in some of these entrepreneurial ventures. Are any of you exploring? Yeah, come on.
Last week in Paris, W3C had a meeting where there was representation from the banks, the merchants, and mostly geeks, looking at equivalents for tokens and keys. So whether it's Bitcoin or it's something else, there will very, very quickly be a move to have a standard and have that kind of financial interaction and new world currency happening around all of these apps.
Are any of you involved in the legal issues surrounding Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies? Do you want to share with us what you're doing, or you're keeping it crypto? Yeah? Okay. Well, in America, it's property, not a currency, correct? Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Because we have to keep track right now of the value at the time you bought it versus the value of what you're spending it on at any given moment, the mathematics of using it for day-to-day expenses, such as for the services that are being described here, would be too difficult. So until somebody, creative comes up with, something like Glimpse is so creative, comes up with that, I think it would be difficult to spend on that. So.
Any of the other exchanges that guarantee the exchange rate to stay the same that day. Your cash comes in and goes out in whatever currency you want.
Raise your hand if you're a lawyer and you're exploring potential business opportunities in the realm of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. When I speak to my students, I always ask them, in our seminar, we always talk about ways in which the roles that young lawyers can serve in leapfrogging into the profession. And I look at the future of cryptocurrency as one of those great areas where the traditional members of the bar have not yet fully caught on with the opportunities involved in Bitcoin. A lot of us have been pretty negative about Bitcoin and think that it can't survive. But what happens to the next iteration of Bitcoin, the next cryptocurrency? Are there roles? If anyone wants to share their thoughts, what will the roles be for lawyers as we evolve our conception of currency and create new methods of cryptocurrency? Anyone care to take a stab at that?
Yeah, currency is very abstract. Art is a currency. Matchsticks are currency. And I think tech world is way ahead. Forget what the IRS says, with all due respect. I think this gentleman had something that's working, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, a lot of the panels and talks we've got this afternoon, we don't have anything specifically on Bitcoin, but we've got discussions on the concepts of crowdsourcing and the role for lawyers in building crowdsourced platforms, the role for lawyers in the crowdfunding world, and now not specifically on crowdfunding broadly, but on crowdfunding the law. How do we crowdfund litigation? How do we crowdfund legal process? I hope throughout the day all of us start thinking about what are the new technologies and new ventures on the horizon, and what will the role of lawyers be in paving the way for these new ventures. We can't just be naysayers. A lot of the folks at big law down on Wall Street across the river, even in academia, think that equity crowdfunding is a terrible idea. It's never going to catch on. I think a lot of technologists, a lot of entrepreneurs out there see potential gold, potential brass ring down the road. Will the lawyers catch up with that? Will the lawyers be right, the traditional lawyers, in that equity crowdfunding can't actually be functional? Or is there a role for equity crowdfunding, and what will the role be for the next generation of lawyer there? Are we taking a break? Or how long a break? We're taking a 15-minute break. Is that cool? We'll have enough time for the next panel? All right, 15-minute break. No food in this room, right?